Welcome to our weekly Boost Cash Flow workshop. The purpose of the workshop is to give you actionable information and, minimize the theory, to as little as possible, so you can every week apply and come back to the workshop, and we can continue, right? So the workshop is organized in, in a very simple three-part format, which is intro, discovery, and next steps. Intro. So the most important part in any process is to really understand where to start. It has to be where you have provided enough information to understand what to do next, and yet you're not being overwhelmed with information, so it does not turn into paralysis by analysis. With this in mind, right? You might have heard before terms lead to order or order to cash or something similar. What is discussed basically is lead to order, for example, is sales team getting a cold lead as an example, and nurturing the relationship with the customer and converting that to an order. And then a client is being onboarded by customer support, etc. Right? And the order, or the first order is being converted to cash, meaning the customer is invoiced and customer pays. Right? That's how it's usually described. I prefer to think, since this is a Boost Cash Flow workshop, I prefer to think of this entire process as lead to cash. The reason I say that, because I want the entire company to understand that we are all in sales. And we're going to discuss things like customer support later, and with a clear understanding that even customer support, or even more so, are actually in sales as well. Happy customer is a returning customer, right? And a repeat customer. And that's what in order to achieve lifetime value of a customer, because we're spending money on marketing, etc., right? Acquiring customer, we need to make sure we're also getting the money back, right? So let us proceed. We agreed, previous slide, that this is what we want. We want to figure out the lead to cash. Great. What do we do now? What is the actual step? This is usually when I introduce business process mapping. And as an internal joke goes, the second I say business process mapping, it turns into business process snapping, right? And you're being tuned out, not listened to, and everyone loses interest. Going, you hear groans. Oh no, not again. Why? Why is it that even though we understand that business process mapping is not useless, what is the reason everyone tunes you out the second you say business process mapping? The reason for that is when anyone mentions to you mapping a process, this is what you see. You see never ending flow charts, 3,000 consultants, months and months of work to map something, to understand, arguing about it, what is the right, what is the right process being mapped, etc. Right? And then you need, after the flowcharts are created, you spend another 3-4 months trying to figure out what to do with it, and a year later, by the time you're done, you know, and clarifying everything and getting everyone to understand, it's already too late because you need to probably redo the process because everything changed, right? So it's important to know that business process mapping is not a way just to look busy. It's not a way to hire consultants and waste money. It's only useful to you if it offers actionable information, and we don't mean by actionable information. We don't mean 5 months from now. We truly mean tomorrow. What can I do tomorrow, right? So the I said promised, right? Very little theory. I'm gonna provide very little theory. But what I want to do is I want to clarify some things that we can, review together, right? So give me 10 minutes and we will, I promise, just stay with me for 10 minutes, basically, right? So we're going to discuss, there are billions of different diagrams, you can look them up online, etc. For the purposes of this discussion, we're going to discuss only 4 diagrams, right? We're truly going to be working with this one. The reason I'm discussing all 4 is to quickly give you a sort of like a insight why you can actually use the other diagrams and they're useful, right? The diagrams are organized from high level to very detailed, right? Like low level. So let us begin. So for example, the first diagram, context diagram. Imagine you and I are talking about your company. And I'm asking you, well, tell me how you operate, who you're working with, etc. Right? We can spend hours and hours and hours writing it out, discussing it, etc. Right? Or we can spend 15, 20 minutes doing this. And that is basically your company is in the middle, or an organization, right? And you laying out the external parties, right? And this is a sample diagram, but any diagram would also will have lawyers, CPAs, any sort of like regulatory bodies you're reporting to, etc. Right? It is very important to understand everyone you're reporting to, basically externally. This chart, you could probably like let's say in 1 hour you can have a decent chart, right? Like very detailed. Is immeasurably helpful to onboarding new employees, to onboarding new CPA firm, to onboarding lawyers, etc. Right, like a law firm. They quickly insurance. They quickly understand what are you dealing with, what are the risks, etc. Right? What are the reporting requirements? For example, a good example: you're onboarding a controller, and he or she should know what are the requirements for the bank. So, for example, if you have any sort of like a debt, like a loan, and there are covenants, meaning what banks expect from you, that needs to be immediately clarified. Okay, see in this line, it says deposits in here, but also we need to report quarterly on our covenants, etc., right? That is extremely important for controller to know. For a lawyer, or insurance, uh, if you're dealing with subcontractors, here another box. Okay, do subcontractors have their own insurance, etc., right? So it's within 1 hour, you're basically mapping out. And important to note, very often this diagram is all you need. Okay, for we do not create diagrams just for the fun of it. We create diagrams with the level of detail that is required by the audience, by the reader, right? So in some cases, for example, say CPA, during onboarding of a new CPA firm, they looked at it and they were like, okay, this is enough. We got it. We'll come back with more questions. So in the previous diagram, you see, like for our purposes, you see the customer part. This is the part we're concentrating on right now, right? So we're moving on. So we took a customer, and again, I'm asking. I don't know anything about your company. We can spend hours talking about it, or I can tell you, all right, customer. Tell me who customer deals with directly. You tell me, well, I have a billing department, I have a merchant department, whatever it is, right? This is what they exchange. And note, in both the prior diagram and this diagram, the lines and what's being changed is extremely simple. There are no details here. It's truly just okay. Now I look at it. For me right now, for example, this diagram, and this is a sample diagram, and for non-existent company, but I can look at it and I immediately understand what's happening here, who customer deals with, right? And this might be enough for this would be a perfect diagram for onboarding a new employee. If they deal with customer, they see what's happening. right? And also, for CPA, they have deeper questions, etc., right? This is just enough to give me information. So this diagram is cross-functional, but it's known as swim lane, is very interesting, and the one we're going to discuss, because it shows you how the let's call it in place file, or folder, whether digital or paper, right? How does that folder, that information, travels through the company's back office, right? So in important to note, it goes left to right, obviously. It's swim lane because it's like a pool, swim lanes, right? It needs to move to the right. I'm going to discuss how to, in a later slide, how to tell like something is not going well, right? Just based on that diagram. It's very crucial to know that in most diagrams, swim lane diagrams, they never have this part, the customer journey. And that is essential. So basically, yes, here we have, for example, customer makes a purchase, the file travels, etc., etc. You have to map out what does it look like from customer perspective. So, for example, make a purchase. What is the milestone here? For example, the customer went on a computer to our website, made a purchase, right, digitally, or the customer calls us, this is the number, presses, press 1, press 2, press 3, whatever. We discuss that part later. What is it actually like? And it's not unheard of, and I'll recommend that, especially if you might have some questions about your own process. Pretend to be a customer, call your own company, see what it feels like, how long are you on hold, how you being treated, etc., right? And this is being documented here, right? The last diagram that we're not going to discuss today, but I just want to mention it, the process flow chart. That is the one actually most people think of when they think, process flow mapping. It is beyond helpful in training and maintaining process within a department. So, for example, let's say this is a customer support flow chart. If I'm a new employee in customer support, and yes, I'm being trained, I'm learning. If I have something like this in front of me, right, like printed out or digital, it doesn't matter. If I have this as a point of reference and I know what to do, and actually, from process perspective, if you gave me this chart and I ran into a situation where I know the answer, right, through the flow, this is wonderful news because you can add this to the, say these are called decision diamonds, and you can see when choice needs to be made, right? So, for example, if new employee, I love actually updating process, and testing the process when new employees arrive, because they ask me questions, and that is a perfect time to update the flow chart to add, decision diamonds, extra instructions, etc. A simple flow chart like this can save, incredible amount of money and time, right? So we're not going to discuss this flow chart today, but I just want to bring to your attention, this could be better than, for example, if you don't have, just take accounting as example, accounting department. If you might not have, especially if you're a small company, you might not have an official, accounting manual, process, etc., right? Because it will take forever. This is not forever. This can take you, let's say, a couple of hours, depending on what you're doing. But it can take the place of accounting manual. And what I often do is when I make this type of a flow chart, as new training materials being created, videos or PDFs, etc., right? I turn the boxes into links. So now, for example, if it says, is a qualified consultant available, right? And I'm a new employee and I go, I have no idea what they're talking about here. It's clickable, or it opens up a video or a PDF file to read, etc., right? So it becomes sort of like a live process manual. And it's all the tools are available for free to do something like this, but the rewards, for the cost is incredible. All right, but this is not the chart for today. All right, so we discussed this. You seem to be, I think you're interested in the flow charts. You partially convinced. All right, great. What's the practice part? So let's go back to the first, slide where we discuss lead to cash. I have also added here, just a sample cash conversion cycle to give you like what sub steps are there, right? And here I'm mentioning something. Do not forget about customer support. They are truly the part of sales, especially if they're participating in onboarding. There's so many customers you can lose, and there are never-ending horror stories that I can share when you lose customers during onboarding. And from personal experience, there are plenty of companies that lost, me or my company as a client during onboarding because you realize that this is not going to work, right? So long term. So even if someone is basically has no choice but to use you for that one, transaction, they're not coming back. They're already looking for a different vendor. Just, So even if you don't agree with me on what flowchart to use, or you have your own ideas about flowcharts, this is the time usually I'm told that, oh, this is swim lane is not useful for me, etc., etc. I like to kind of think in a sales funnel type of a, or some other chart. It's fine. This is not where the issue is. I don't care what format you use. However, I want to note that I will be bringing to your attention 3 items no matter what format you use. Number 1, you need to always know who is accountable for each stage in the process, the customer journey, right? Whether it's a department or if you're a small company, it's literally one human being that acts as a department. It does not matter. It's fine. It has to be like so for every single stage of the process you have, whichever way you map, you have a name in your company, a person who's accountable, directly accountable for that process. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, for each stage, I will ask you what's your KPI, what's your number for that stage. And it does not mean like, for example, in case of sales, I make 100 calls, talk to 10 customers, it's potential, etc. It means you have KPI for each stage. Meaning, for example, if you have, if you, let's say, customers reach out to you by phone, let's say you're a service company, they reach out to you by phone. My KPI would be, okay, how long are they on hold? How long does it take them to get to a human being? How long does it take you to dispatch a service person, etc., etc., right? And we're not looking for 10,000 KPIs or numbers to track, etc. We're looking for 1, 2 numbers per person accountable for that stage. Something that truly makes a difference. All right. And no matter what, and the third thing is no matter what format you use, if you notice here on the swim lane, you have customer journey horizontally. On the sales funnel type of format, you have vertical customer journey. You always need to understand that no matter what you do, whatever the format you use, whichever way you track, you need to understand there's a customer journey parallel to the process, and that's what you need to be aware of. So everything you do, okay, what does it look like from a customer point of view? Okay, otherwise, that's not going to work out. But let's continue. So I'm using terminology of 30, 60, 90. This is not meaning 30, 60, 90 days. Not because I expect you to complete the next steps in 30, 60, 90 days. If it's up to me, anything related to cash flow must be done yesterday, and as soon as possible. The reason I put here 30, 60, 90 is so we have a clear understanding that this is time sensitive and it must move through the timeline. This is not something to do tomorrow. Like let's discuss it next year if we have a budget, etc. Right? You must move through this, right? Otherwise, there'll be no changes. So let's start with 30, and let's pause, like slow down a bit, and discuss each one. So, for example, number one, document process as is, and this is extremely important. First step for us is to document the process the way it is happening now. Please, reserve yourself from having aha moments and criticizing what you have, what the process you have right now, etc. Right? This will only cause the team to to turtle up, as they say in martial arts, and just hide because they'll feel like it's a witch hunt. So eh, you document unless something critical, unless you see something where the customer is being basically the relation is being hurt, the company is losing money, like something critical. Of course, if something critical, then you need to fix it. But at the same, but it needs to be done carefully, so the team does not feel like they're being hunted, right? So you document the process as is. Please note, I say here, when it jumps back and forth between departments or people. So what I mean by this is, in the swimline diagram, in the perfect world, when process starts, it will have as little as possible jumps between departments. If this is a department in a line, if this is being crossed, every single time this happens, there is a chance there'll be a mistake, right? So this needs to be minimized. And as you see here, if your swim lane diagram looks like a heartbeat, this is wonderful news because you found something you can fix relatively easily, and it will have 100% improvement in your customer support. And please notice when I said wonderful news, because everything you discover must be treated as wonderful news. Yes, you might be disappointed that something is not perfect, but you must also be aware that this is actually great. I found something I can, fix. So everything we're discussing here is things you will when you start adjusting them or fixing them, will have you'll see immediate results. All right. Next, identify who's accountable for each stage of the process. I'm sorry to say that you might be disappointed to find out that some of your stages do not have anyone accountable. We have 3,000 people responsible, but not a single person accountable, right? So again, treat it as wonderful news, because this part, if you find that you have no one accountable for a certain stage of a process, this actually will change the effectiveness of your team, right? So document and move on. Determine which KPIs to track for each stage. See what's being tracked. Does the person have a number or something they're trying to hit? If they don't have anything, again, great news. Write it down and move on, because we need to approach it. Try to understand in your current process, if let's assume all KPI, every single person has some sort of KPI, even like mental. They go, hey, listen, if someone calls me, I want to make sure that they stay on the phone not more than 1 minute. That's kind of like my benchmark. Fine. Try to understand, do you have any visibility into this number? If you do not have visibility, write it down and move on. Verify the accuracy. Can you trust the number? And I don't mean the numbers are being faked. Let's put that one aside for now. If someone records their KPIs, how can you verify for example, if you're looking at the KPI in some, Google Doc or Excel file, public available for everyone, with a dashboard, etc. Are you looking at data from today, yesterday? How often it's updated, right? Write it down and move on. Do not try to adjust it. This is not, not going to go well. Now, benchmark the time for each step. So if customer called, 1 minute on hold, It takes average, let's say, 15 minutes to discuss what customer requires, 10 minutes to dispatch, etc., etc., etc. Document each step, the time, and we'll discuss later why. And document current customer journey. So as I mentioned before, to the best of your ability, just write down from customer perspective, uh, what is their interaction with you. Okay. So now let's move on to the next. So the next step, and by the way, the 30 and 60 days steps can be done in parallel if you have the resources. So, for example, one person or team could be doing the 30 stage. Uh, the next team can start 60 days, and I'll explain why. So then, in the next step, so the 30 days was basically you gathering up information on the process as is, right? Now, in 60 days, you start gathering up the benchmark numbers that are normal. I use that term very, general for your industry. What does you, for example, top competitors have? You might be a top, you might be the top company in your industry. Congratulations, but look at your, peers and see what are their numbers, because you might be doing 99% better than everyone else, but there might be some numbers you might want to improve. So that's a really, really easy way to kind of figure it out. The second one is also very important, is understand customer journey from your competitors, peers, etc. Right? What does it look for them? It might be where you have the best customer journey, or some items might need to be improved. But that's a really a good way to benchmark it, right? Uh, Now that you start gathering up those, two items, now you're starting to be able to compare, right? So you start to kind of like, okay, I see that, let's say, one stage everyone else does it, twice faster. Why, right? You start understanding your own stages, which brings you basically to your bottlenecks. So, for example, when I say bottlenecks, we need to, there's it's called theory of constraints. But to put it simple, uh, if, for example, every single step you are 10 times faster than every competitor, but you have one stage, let's say here, doesn't matter, let's say this stage, right? Complete sale. It's slow, and it's 10 times slower than every competitor. Guess what? That one process will control the speed of your entire process. Agreed, right? Because before, up to this process, up to this stage, this part might fly at warp speed. This one, it slows down to almost a halt, and everyone waits. So the entire chain down, waits for this process to be done, right? And that's why it's called a bottleneck, because it will control the entire process. So you can invest all the money in the world to this, let's say, stages. Uh, if this one is not being adjusted, being sped up, doesn't there will be a waste of money to increase efficiency here, right? So that very often when you find a bottleneck, you sorry, when I got too excited to continue, uh when you find a bottleneck, you might fix 100% of your issues immediately, because the customer might be upset because it takes you forever to complete some order, etc., right? And you might actually find something that will immediately fix that. And the fixes might be, we're going to discuss right now in the next 90 days, but the fix might be uh, a simple adjustment in a process that might cost you almost nothing, or nothing really, and will increase customer satisfaction. So 90 days. So now that we went through we collected internal information, We collected external, and we kind of, you know, we now know, right, compared to others, etc. Right? We know what needs to be improved. The first step, please note, I say evaluate the resources required for each stage. And this is actually very important. To give you an example, let's say your competitor, let's say we'll take service calls as an example. It takes you, well, let's say you keep customer on hold for 2 minutes while you organizing them, etc. Right? Your competitor does that in 15 seconds. Obviously, it's they're doing it faster. But then you realize that the competitor was purchased by private equity fund. They dumped incredible amount of money into the company, and they hired 10 times the number of customer support employees, right? So if you go, and that is why they're much faster, right? You cannot match it right now, that the number they have, right? But at the same time, if you go to your own team and tell them, listen, we're all suck. Here is a company doing 10,000 times better, and you're talking to employees that doing overtime, working late nights, weekends, and now they feel like they're not being appreciated with all the hard work. So please also make sure that the number you're trying to meet, you have the resources. So, for example, maybe you need a software if you can't afford, labor resource. Maybe some sort of software to speed things up, maybe improve a process somehow to tighten it up. But you might not be able to hit the number, the perfect number. But make sure also, you don't discourage employees that working. So you also start implementing internal process improvements and start implementing customer journey improvements. And I'm putting them separately because even though it might sound like it's the same thing, it's not, because the internal process is back office and customer journey is from the perspective of customer, right? So the reason I keep them separate is because as you need to constantly evaluate, because you might do something in back office that is a great improvement, but it has zero effect on customer journey. So you also need to understand, okay, yes, I can improve that part, but it will not make my customer happy, you know, in this moment. And so let's put this aside, right? We need to make sure that both improvements are the end result is a happier customer, the repeat customer, more cash, etc. Right? So you need to make sure that the both are being evaluated at the same time as you're moving through the process. Plan for regular reviews. Okay, it's crucial for you to review the process constantly. The reason being is that even if your process is perfect, you always need to make sure you're not, for example, let's say there might be new software, case in point, AI, right? Uh, if a new tool came out that might save labor time, right? You need to implement it and measure and measure and measure, right? So I want to check if we're uh, uh, on 60 days, because we start talking bottlenecks, the three more items at the end that on 60 days I want to discuss and I skipped. Uh, num, uh, Number this one. Let's start with this one. Process aligns with overall business and goals. Uh, this is a tricky one because you might have a process that is perfect, meaning there are no customer complaints, everyone is happy, etc. Right? But it's not a good process long term. The reason for that is, let's take customer support as an example. You can have a customer that requires 10 customer support people to assist nonstop, right? Customer is extremely happy, but this is not something we can scale, right? Because uh, the difference between growth and scaling up is when you're growing, you costs are kind of matching, basically following your revenue, right? Proportionately, more or less. The scale, what makes scale up different is your revenue is growing, but your costs are not following, in parallel, within the same ratio, right? So if we have right now basically a business model where you need 10 customer support people, as an example, to take care of one customer, we know we cannot scale that because we're just going to lose all the cash, right? So we want to scale where, and you might need to review customers as well, but we need to scale in a way where we can minimize the costs while growing the revenue. And document everything. This is even if when you have ideas, so intuition slash gut feelings, write everything down because this will be useful as this process continues, right? And this one is crucial and can save you a lot of money. And that is when we get feedback from stakeholders, this does not only mean management. I'm actually more interested in feedback from the front line, from the employees who actually do the work. I promise you with 100% certainty that if you create an environment where frontline employees feel comfortable, confident to provide ideas, and they also see that you implement them and you consider them, right? This will open a floodgate of information for you. Will save incredible amount of money on consultants, uh, wasting time, etc. Right? I've never seen that part fail. Right? Once employees, the performers, once they start sharing information because they're in it like daily, right? You will have more than enough ideas on how to improve things, right? So the the final step, right? What is the final step? And the final step is always the same. The final step is for you to start implementing what we discussed. Okay, we you will come back every workshop for refresher. I also have other workshops. You will document it. Do not concentrate on software. Do not consider the methodology, even the flow charts, whichever does not matter. The most important part is for you to sit down and start, mapping it out. All right, and if you need if you have any questions, please come back. Please actually find me come back to the workshops, the refreshers, and also you can find me on LinkedIn very easily. I will do my best to answer all your questions. Thank you very much.